All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to those online to the June Project Wildfire meeting. Just a few things. We'll do some introductions of the folks in the room so everybody knows who's here. For those that are on Zoom, if you wouldn't mind, we'd really appreciate your introduction in the chat. It also helps us capture for the meeting notes who is here. So thank you for just taking a minute to put your name and any affiliation down. We'd appreciate that. And just before we do a quick round of introductions, just want to run through the agenda really briefly. Boone's going to give us the regular program update to start us off for a few minutes. Then we'll have Brent Steele, who's with us from Oregon State University, to go over a recent survey that he has completed a while back, and then we'll do a round of any updates that folks want to share. So with that, I guess I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Ed Keith, the County Forester for Deschutes County, and we'll just go around the room here.
Boone Zimmerly, Director of Project Wildfire.
Miller, State Farm Office.
Abby Adair, Deschutes County Commissioner.
Boyd Turner, Eagle Crest, HOA.
Okay, great. We'll turn it over to Boone, and Boone's got a real brief update for us. I don't know how real brief it is, but it's a few-minute update.
It'll be brief enough. I'll share my screen here and switch over. Okay, so just kind of running through things, you know, as everybody's aware.
It's not sharing.
Oh, wait a minute, it's not sharing. Stand by.
There we go.
I think that one's working.
Yep.
As everybody's aware, we're well underway with Fire Free. So I just kind of wanted to remind folks that Fire Free is currently ending at Deschutes County, not landfill. Sorry, not landfill. Not landfill is ending. It ended this last weekend. Then we'll be switching that over to the transfer sites. So the transfer sites will start running here, starting this weekend, May 21st, and running through June 4th. What I got up, of course, is firefree.org. So if you go to the website, you can pull all of this up, see the specific dates of where those locations are running, and there's also the flyer that you can print out if you need it. So we'll be promoting all those other sites as we go through this next week. Also, I guess just thinking about us turning from spring and slowly into summer here before we know it'll be fire season. Fire Free is our way of giving a place for folks to get rid of that debris as they're cleaning around their house. We promote our evacuations as well. Make sure people are promoting the next kind of phase of things, but also May being the preparedness month. May 7th was our Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. There's a lot of our Firewise sites took advantage of that day and held their education events or some kind of barbecue or did a community effort of cleaning something up. But lots of emails have been coming in with pictures. If you've got a project that you did and you took pictures, please do send that over to me. I'd love to add those to the database of photos, if you will. Yeah, but I'll add those to the database. Like to see those projects, lots of fun. May 7th was a busy day. I think it was probably busy for everybody, not just myself. But from the pictures I saw, it looks like fire departments were busy, Oregon Department of Forestry was busy, doing lots of engine displays, having folks out talking about principal space and really engaging with the community. So nice work out there on all that. I guess thinking about Firewise communities, there, I think it goes without saying that we continue down the path. We've got several communities in the hopper. They're continuing down that street of becoming recognized. Yeah, and I guess I'm going to put that plug out there again. That if you are working in a district and you want to know who is in your district that's becoming Firewise, or you'd like to help some of those communities become Firewise, let me know, myself or Ross Hupton. He stays quite engaged with all of them, but we can connect you with those communities. They're always looking for guest speakers, and they're always looking for help to kind of get them down that path. It's a great way to engage with the communities in your local news. And then I think the biggest ticket item that we've been working on lately is our Redmond CWPP. That's well underway. We've got we're into the final draft version. So let me see if I can. It's hiding what is that other? Stand by, everybody. Got it. Okay, so on our Project Wildfire webpage, so projectwildfire.org, you can go to the Community Wildfire Protection Plans. I have a short piece just talking about the Greater Redmond CWPP being out and available for public review. Below are the links to it, so you can look at the past ones, but also our new one. It's in draft form, but you can look at it. If you have any input or comments, please do email me back. You can email the Project Wildfire. You can reply back on this webpage here, but also directly to myself. I did also, the ways we're getting it out there, we also did a blog post on it, so you can find the blog post down here and read more about it. It talks about our updates. We did have a few different updates in the plan. One was changing the boundary on this west side of the plan. We also incorporated in the Lower Bridge RFPA, so they're now part of the Greater Redmond CWPP. And then we also gathered all the inputs and accomplishments from the last 5 years across all of our partners that are within that planning area. And all of that is incorporated into the draft version right now if you wanted to look at it. One of the other places that if you want to learn more about CWPPs in general, including what goes into the revisions, of course, is our story map. You can scroll through it, you get this bar, you can jump straight to whatever section you want to jump to look at some of our CWPPs, who's involved, and what we really focus on. So that's out there. We also shared it through social media. I emailed that out to everybody. Probably everyone on this call received an email with that link and the other links I just showed there. The end goal is to have signatures by the end of July. So as this comes back, we'll have a meeting in June to kind of look through any comments that we do gather, make adjustments as necessary, and then get this out for signature across all the partners, and then have it conclude by July. If you, like I said earlier, if you see anything you want to make comments about or anything you want to add to it, send me an email with those suggestions so we can gather that input and take a look at what we should be doing with it. With that, I think that's everything unless Ed's got something that I missed.
I don't. Are there any questions for any of the things Boone covered? All right, seeing none. I did put a link to the story map in there. It's a shortcut link for y'all if you want to check that out. It's we just discovered, I think, that we need to repost the link from the Project Wildfire Community Wildfire Protection Plan page to that story map that got inadvertently deleted. All right. Well, with that, then, don't see any questions coming up in the chat either. So we are going to turn it over to Brent Steele. Brent's with Oregon State University, and he's a director and professor, and quite a long title, Brent, of all your all the ways that you're connected there to the School of Public Policy at Oregon State University. But you just recently, not too long ago at least, completed a survey that has some pretty interesting insights, and Brent's going to be covering that for us today. So with that, Brent, I'll turn it over to you, and I believe you should just be able to share your screen if you have something to pop up there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to put a PowerPoint up right here that we recently used at a conference using the data we have here. And the first part of the PowerPoint, I'm going to skip over because you all know more about this than I do. So, you know, we gave this, my colleague Erica Allen Walters and I delivered this paper at a couple different meetings recently in political science. And so one of the things we have to do is go through, kind of background on wildfires in the American West and historical wildfire policy and everything that's been happening. And then we go over fire-wise actions and behaviors so that the audience knows kind of what we're talking about. But the survey we did was late last summer, and I'll go over the methods in a little more detail. But in when was that? 2012, we did a survey very similar to this in Central Oregon, and I misplaced the results on that. And I just found them this morning because I thought it might be interesting to see how things may have changed or not over the last 10 years in terms of how people are thinking about wildfire and preparing. And so I'll try to put something together and send it to you. The other that previous survey, that was part of an NSF grant that we had. I don't know, I think some of you may have been familiar with it, that we did in Central Oregon, where we were modeling all kinds of things to see how people were trying to adapt to wildfire and increasing wildfire danger. And so we replicated that late last summer, but it's just in Deschutes County, not all Central Oregon. So it's not really comparable that much, but it might still be interesting. And the purpose of this is related to, and you probably are familiar with the new NSF project we have going on with our Bart Johnson and Max up at Portland State University. So researchers from PSU, U of O, and OSU. See, we can get along together. We're looking at wildfire mitigation in various places in the American West, and one of them being the Deschutes area. And the goal of this particular study was to understand who and why people are, who's most likely to engage in wildfire mitigation behaviors. What are the predictors of that? And some of the things that we're looking at is impact of wildfire events. Have they been exposed before? Their risk perception, proximity to wildlands, demographics, and then for the first time looking at cultural theory. And that this is a theory in sociology and political science that's been used to study people's risk perceptions concerning natural disasters and hazards. And it's never been used to look at wildfire before. It's used for like tornadoes, climate change, hurricanes, and things such as that, earthquakes, but it's never been used in wildfire. So, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail here. Cultural theory, so it comes from Mary Douglas, a sociologist, and Aaron Wildowski, a political scientist, who we're looking at how people think about things, where they get information, how they perceive risks. And so they came up with these kind of 4 cultural dimensions of how people think about things. And these are not necessarily mutually exclusive all the times, but they came up with this. There's a lot of research going on right now. A huge group. I was just in the conference. There were 60 of us that were participating using cultural theory, looking at how to predict behaviors and risk assessment stuff. And they came up with there's 4 kind of schools of thought here. So one is kind of a fatalistic culture, and that's basically, everything's going to hell and there's not much you can do about it. And then they came up with a hierarchical cultural trait. That's basically that people act collectively, they follow instructions, they listen to experts and behave accordingly. And then there's the individualism cultural trait. And this is basically, so I grew up in Eastern Washington, so I kind of call it somewhat of a cowboy conservatism, is that, kind of are free to choose. The responsibility is based on individuals, you act independently. You don't really need a lot of regulation or control. And then finally, egalitarianism. And so this would be, everyone should be equal, and more social control roles, people act collectively. And so this is kind of the grid that they came up with. Some social scientists have then looked at how this goes to explain people's perceptions towards the environment. And so for example, the Semowat et al. 2015, so they say egalitarians are seek to protect and preserve the environment. Hierarchists defer to experts on natural hazards. Individualist reliance on technology to solve environmental issues feel nature is always in balance. And then fatalist is feel risk is unpredictable and resources are limited, so there's not much you can do. The survey, this particular survey with Gate was a mixed method. So we sent a mailing out, hand signed it with also a link, we call it Qualtrics software in campus here. So you could either return a mail survey or fill it out online. And we did this in the summer of last year. So it's getting a little dated. Out of OPAL, which is our Oregon Policy Analysis Laboratory, which we use students, graduate students, and sometimes undergraduates to work on applied research projects. And the sample was basically WUI households in the Deschutes County, random sample. We sent it out to 1,500 households, and we got a pretty good return actually for surveys now, 458 response, about 30% response rate. And part of that might have been because of the salience of wildfire. But I believe when we did this in 2012, we got a lot, we did better in a response rate than this. I'll have to check that out. Based on previous research we did in Central Oregon, looking at who engages in firewise behaviors or not, we found previously that younger home and property owners were more likely to engage in firewise activities. We also found, and this is based on other literature too, besides what we found before, but and more highly educated homes, so people with more higher levels of formal educational attainment, and property owners were more, instead of renters, more likely to engage in firewise behaviors. We also found, not surprisingly, that home and property owners that have higher levels of concern of wildfire risk to their own homes and property will engage in more behaviors, firewise behaviors. And then those people that believe there's a high probability of wildfire near their homes were more likely to engage in firewise behaviors. And then we also found that previously that home and property owners that live in proximity of wildland area, forest or rangeland are more likely to engage in firewise behaviors, not surprisingly. And then we also found previously that home and property owners that have undeveloped properties next to their property will be more likely to engage in behaviors. And then, and I can post this up so people want to access this PowerPoint again. And we also, and then the new variables, we didn't do this previously, is we incorporated cultural theory here. And based upon the literature, we argued that those home and property owners that have higher levels of egalitarian and hierarchist cultural traits will engage in more firewise behaviors than those that are fatalistic or individualistic. And so one of the things we put in there, so this is a battery of questions that has been developed that a lot of academics are using now to measure cultural theory. And there's actually a much longer version of this, but when you're doing a survey, you got to keep things short. And so this is a shorter version. And so to kind of measure cultural traits, there's three statements that are used for each of the four cultural traits. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this at the moment, but you can kind of see here that, so for the individualistic, you can see there that all three are very individualistic oriented, obviously. And what this is telling us here, that for statistically, a convex alpha here, this is a statistic that social scientists use to look at consistency or reliability of results. So if people agreed with one of these, they probably agreed with the other two. So that's a really high convex alpha right there. So people if they agreed or disagreed with this, they were pretty consistent with all three items. Hierarchical, once again, the internal consistency is once again very high. You're looking for something like 0.6 and higher. 1 would be perfect. Every single person would be have a perfectly consistent responses. And then with egalitarian statements, once again, people were fairly consistent. And then the fatalist was a little less consistent, but still pretty good in the survey. So one of the things we used previously was a list of potential firewise behaviors, and this came from the literature. And so this particular table here looks at cultural traits. and engagement in certain fire-wise behaviors. So the first set deals with general planning, prepare an evacuation plan. And then the second one was consider weather reports when planning recreational activities. And so you can see here, the yellow is the highest percent of people saying they engaged in that type of behavior, and the blue is the lowest. And so prepare an evacuation plan in case of wildfire, you can see the egalitarians, as we thought, were more likely to engage in that behavior. And then considering weather reports, once again, egalitarians were more likely to engage in that behavior. Individualists were the lowest here, as we somewhat expected. But you can see a lot of people say that they consider weather reports when they're planning recreational behaviors. Community activities, attend community-based meetings related to wildfire. You can see that egalitarians were the highest there, 25.4%. Individualists were the lowest. And we didn't ask them how many or things like that, but if they've just engaged in that in the recent years. The next one was probably interesting for Project Wildfire. So obtain information from a land management community group or firefighting agency. I do a lot of research on political participation and people engaging in certain types of information gathering. This is pretty high for research like this. And so once again, egalitarians were the highest. Individualists were the lowest, but still, that's 23.4%. That's still pretty high if you compare it to other types of engagement behaviors. The other things we asked are that firewise is property protection activities. So planting fire-resistant plants, planting trees and shrubs at least 15 feet apart, and then pruning the branches of all trees within 85 feet of the home. You can see once again, egalitarians were more likely to engage in those. Individualists, for the most part, were least likely. And then we asked about home protection activities. So clean roof surfaces, gutters, and surrounding vegetation. You can see that that's pretty high all across the board there, not surprisingly, with that activity. But you can see up to 79.3% were the highest of egalitarians. But still, with individualists, 58.6%, that's still pretty high. And then stacking firewood or lumber at least 30 feet from the house. You can see once against egalitarians, and then use non-flammable building materials such as tile, slate, or stone. You can see once against egalitarians. So it's pretty interesting. So it looks like the cultural theory is working well here, as it does with other kind of natural hazard behaviors that people engage in. So one of the things we did in this study too is we did some multivariate analysis. So basically looking at when you put all of these things together, does cultural theory still explain certain types of behaviors, controlling for other things that we found in the past? And so one of the things we controlled for is some demographic factors, so age, gender, and formal educational attainment. And so I put how these are coded here. You can see the age and years for the survey response was 25 to 85. Then concern, we asked people a level of concern of wildfire damage to their private property, and then we had a scale of 1, not a concern, to 4, great concern. We also asked people, we put kind of a thermometer on the survey, what's the probability of wildfire near your home in the next 5 years? And that went from 0% to 100%. You can see the mean score there is 58%, so that's somewhat in the middle. We asked people if they had experience of wildfire within several miles of their home the last 5 years. And then rules, we asked the homeowner if there's a homeowner association, subdivision, or insurance rules about landscape or building materials to help protect against fires. And you can see 35% said, yeah, we have something like that. And the rest are no, or they don't know if there is or not. And then additional variables we asked, previously we found out that people that lived to undeveloped areas were more likely to engage in firewise behaviors. So we have this is called a dummy variable. So 1 developed, 0 undeveloped. So most of the people respond here. You can see, not surprisingly, 0.84, 84% of the sample said they're next to a developed property. I would be interested if I can find that old data, given all the development that's happened in the last 10 years, this is probably much higher than our previous response rates. And then we also asked people if their home is near a wildland area, either forest or rangeland. And so we had a scale there 1 to 6, as 1 lived within a wildland area to 6 more than 3 miles away. And finally, one of the things we were interested in, and I ran some extra results that we didn't present at the conferences, but on information sources that people use for wildfire information. And there's a list of 11 of them. If you looked at the survey, you can see the list there. And so on average, people, it's 3.23, so people a little over 3 different information sources that they use. And so we're using these to look at the number of firewise behaviors someone would engage in. And so, this is a regression model here. And so we're looking at the impact of the various variables on firewise behaviors. So what we're trying to explain here, so we saw the previous list of firewise behaviors from community planning, home protection activities and stuff. And so we have a scale there that goes from like 11 to, I believe it's 12. So 0 would be I engaged in no firewise behaviors, 12 would be all of them. And then so that's what we're trying to predict here, just the number that they engaged in. And so we're using these variables that I just went through to see if we can predict who's engaging in these or not. And the first thing I'll tell you, so this down here is the adjusted R-score. That's a statistic that explain what percent of the variation of that 0 to 12 does this model predict. And that for survey data, that's really high. I mean, that's really high. And what we found here is that when we're trying to predict the number of firewise behaviors, is that none of the 3 demographic variables work. So age, gender, and education do not statistically predict the number of firewise behaviors someone is engaged in. However, the highlighted yellow ones here are statistically significant and do predict. And so the first one was concern about, so that was the variable concern about potential future wildfire danger to their property. And so that's significant, not surprisingly. And then we also found probability. So that was that scale, 0% probability that there'll be a fire near my home to 100%. That's also statistically significant, not surprisingly. And then what we also found is that if people had experience with wildfire near their home in recent years, that also, not surprisingly, is statistically significant. And then the next one, rules. So if there's rules, there's a home association, community rules on that pertain to wildfire in your community. Not surprisingly, that also is statistically significant. So I know I have in-laws that have a place in the Sun River, and I'm fairly familiar with the types of things they have to do when they maintain their home there. And then the other thing we found out is that this is a negative coefficient, but what we found here is that if someone's within a wildland area or close to a wildland area, they're more likely to engage in firewise behaviors than someone that lives at distance. Once again, probably not that surprising. And then we get to our cultural traits here that we included in the model. And so what we find here is with the individualist kind of cultural trait, they're significantly less likely, people that have strong individualist cultural traits are significantly less likely to engage in firewise behaviors, which is kind of what we thought might happen. The hierarchists, we thought people would engage in more firewise. It didn't work. It didn't have a statistical significant impact. And then, as we saw previously, egalitarians are much more likely to participate in firewise behaviors. And then, fatalists, people that, once again, that there's not much you can do, things are just going to happen, were significantly less likely to participate in behaviors like you might expect. And then finally, we have this question on sources here. How many sources people use to learn about wildfire mitigation strategies and stuff? So that's positive. So the more sources that people use, the more likely it is they're going to engage in those behaviors. The other thing I did in the papers, I just ran this yesterday, and so going back to look at how we measure the cultural traits, the scale goes from 1 to 7, and so if someone agrees with one of those cultural traits, it's a 5, 6, or 7, and so on those scales, and if they disagree, it's the lower range of that scale. And so what I did yesterday in preparation for the meeting here is I created a new variable where anyone that was 5, 6, or 7 on each one of these traits, so they're agreeing with all 3 of the statements that are measuring that trait. I coded them a 1 and everyone else a 0 that had mixed responses. And so I'm just looking at, and I haven't really thought about this too much through here yet, but just looking at where people get information. And so we have a theory in social science called motivated reasoning theory, and it's basically that people often like to go to the source that confirms what they already believe, confirmation bias. Okay, and so I haven't really thought this through here, but it's pretty interesting, the results right here. And so where people are getting information, and so you can see one of the options we had was family member there. You can see for fatalists, hierarchists, and individualists, it's a majority are saying, you know what, yeah, I use a family member to get information about wildfire. Less so egalitarians. Then when it comes to a neighbor, listening to a neighbor, you can see it's pretty high for individualists, hierarchists, and fatalists, and a little bit lower for egalitarians. Neighborhood associations, you can see it's pretty interesting. Fatalists were the lowest here, but you know, it still is pretty high, I think, for individuals, egalitarians, or hierarchy. And the next one, I think this is really interesting. The local fire awareness group, something like Project Wildfire, you can see that that's really high for egalitarians there. And then I just skipped over local fire department. So that's the one that most people use, is not surprisingly the local fire department. Then local collaborative groups, and you know, a lot of people might, you know, maybe they're not familiar with that or are not, but you see egalitarians were the highest there. City and county government, and then university extension agent. Obviously, we don't have that many extension agents that are dealing with wildfire issues out of OSU. ODF, you can see egalitarians there. The literature would say that hierarchists would be probably the highest there, but BLM, and I know there's not a lot of BLM land in the area. Nature Conservancy, we threw in a kind of environmental group, and then U.S. Forest Service. So anyway, kind of interesting. I need to go in and do some more analysis on this, but that's kind of the results we have there. And so finally, you know, the things that we found out that people engaging in Firewise is, you know, if they have a concern, which makes sense, if they think that the probability of a wildfire impacting their private property is high, if they have experience, for example, evacuation, rules in place in the community, proximity, and then cultural theory traits. And so that's just the first cut of one of the first analyses that we did. I don't know if you want to go over. So one of the things I did see, looking at just briefly this morning with the 2012 versus 2022, it looks like people are more open to thinning and prescribed fire than they were 10 years ago. But I'll try to put something together on that and send it to you all when I get a chance here this next week. So basically that was just one of the ways that we're trying to look at the data here. And I think that you guys, Boone, and you guys posted the survey results, the frequencies on the website or something, or you sent it out. So any questions on this? I mean, I could go over more material if you want to, but I just thought it might be interesting to look at the first time that cultural theory has been used on for wildfire risk.
Who has questions? And just feel free to come off mute if you do. Looks like Dean has one.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks, Brent. That's pretty interesting information, and I can see it in our communities and on the ground. We have a couple dozen communities in the Upper Deschutes River area. And overall, I think that there's a lot more awareness, and it's building, and a lot more concern, and it rings true that the individualistic and fatalistic types are least likely to engage. And in our experience in South County, it's like the further south you go, the more of that kind of behavior you see. And the egalitarian, I think, is the big, I put a big star next to that. And Firewise, I think that that's going to be the future of us really making inroads and progress, is getting a nucleus of concerned people in communities. Thank you.
So one thing I might add too, so they at University of Oklahoma, there's a big research group there that studies natural hazards and people's response, like tornadoes and things like that. And they've used this cultural theory to try to tailor different messages to frame natural disasters for different types of communities. So it's been I can send some of that research too if someone's interested. But so trying to communicate to people who have different views on how society functions, or the role of an individual in society, can be very useful. So I got Andy. Has a question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
So I was curious about the 35 approximately percentage that your survey participants said that they were aware or knew that the insurance company had some requirements of what needed to happen for their property. I'm curious because I think that percentage, even in the very short term, is going to be quite more, where almost all insurance companies, especially in Deschutes County, Southern Deschutes County, where I'm at, is going to make sure that's in place, or they'll be doing a lot of non-renewals or very large surcharges on their premiums. So do you think with the new legislation and all that stuff going through that that's going to be a higher percentage? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the previous projects I worked on was we had a joint fire program. We went into areas working with people at Wisconsin. They have a lot of wildfire researchers there, and us here at Oregon State. We went into communities that have suffered from a catastrophic wildfire, and we interviewed people that rebuilt or stayed in the community. And it was really interesting. That I got that report on my website here, but it's on your different sides of this. But people that had insurance were more likely to stay in the community and rebuild, as you might imagine, whereas people that didn't have insurance were more likely to leave. And so we had kind of a catastrophic decline of population in a lot of small rural communities that have suffered that. But I think obviously this is I think a greater requirement of having coverage and stuff like that is going to have people engaging in behaviors. That's pretty clear what the data show.
Thank you.
Okay, Todd Todd has a question.
Yeah, I do. I got actually a couple of them. It's kind of interesting. And Brett, by the way, this is really fascinating because there's a lot that probably goes with this, and we could talk for hours on this subject. But my first question to you would be, with the the fatalist, individualist, egalitarian, and hierarchy, has there been correlation with that with economics and education?
Yes. And what's going to be interesting here too. So I haven't seen, you all have probably seen something like this. So I'm waiting for kind of like the Population Research Center at Portland State to come out on, who's moving to where in Oregon, and with the tremendous rapid growth in Deschutes County, what types of people are moving in there. And I kind of suspect, so when I moved, when I first moved to Oregon, Deschutes was pretty kind of reddish and politically, and then it's looking pretty purple right now. And then they've carved the new district in, and you just wonder what kinds of people are moving in right now. And so I think that's what I'm kind of interested in, and looking at the 2012 data now, because we've got really high level educated people moving in with higher incomes and stuff like that. It can mean a couple different things. But people that are amenity focused and stuff like that are probably a little more egalitarian oriented. So that, yeah, but I can say I haven't even looked at the data here yet to see if that, I haven't tried to predict the cultural traits in the sample yet, but.
Right. And then my next question, kind of the follow up on that, because that's kind of how I'm kind of equating some things, is you got some fail-lists over there, especially in South County, that probably economic wise are probably strapped, and the lack of education. And I cracked up when I saw your chart there that they get it from the family members. So what my next question is, for some of these fail-lists to move a little to the more individual or hierarchy side of things, maybe, or even Aquarian, how do you change their behavior? Do you keep talking to family members, I guess, or?
Yeah. So your people are raised in South County. I had a couple real interesting phone calls from people, and I did have one of the, if you remember the conspiracy theory about the Jewish space lasers starting a wildfire, I did get a call like that. But even that person, I spent about an hour on the phone with them talking about things, and you could reason with them if when you're talking about how it might impact them individually, because the person was definitely, one of the people I talked to was definitely fatalist, that they thought that a fire's going to come and it's going to wipe everything out, and that's just the way it is. And it's kind of like, try to talk to them, well, there's things you could do, and if you come across reason that, I actually think I had an influence on him a little bit, but we'll see. I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, I got Phil.
Hey there. Thanks for taking my question. I think the implicit hypotheses behind Project Wildfire and efforts like this is that if you offer people technical assistance and cost share, it will help with adoption of wildfire protective practices. So I didn't really see those. I was trying to figure out how those factors, offering people technical assistance, I guess that's education, or cost share, incentives or financial support, how those affect the uptake of these behaviors. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, we didn't really get into that too much. I'll have to look back at the survey, but I from other things I've done, yeah, of course, that would be a huge help. Because, there's, this is costly to do some of these things and takes time, but I think technical assistance and financial support would have a very positive impact. And, something that should go into a survey next time. And we had the previous project in 2012, we did a survey of non-industrial private forest owners in Central Oregon. And we asked questions about thinning on their property and stuff. And we did have questions like that. And they said they were significantly more likely to engage in thinning and management of their property if they got financial support or technical assistance. So in previous research that's shown that. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and one of the earlier questions that dealt with insurance, I mean, in some ways that's sort of the opposite of cost share. That's like a financial penalty, for not doing things. So definitely those financial incentives and disincentives would be really interesting to get a better understanding of how those affect behavior.
Yeah. I should have had an economist on the study.
Next time. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, got Dean.
Phil, in Upper Shoots River communities, we've had defensible space programs for the last few years to give assistance to people. And this year, the response is overwhelming. All of our grant funds went in about 2 weeks as soon as we announced that it opened up. And so people are really really happy to get that assistance. I can attest it's a lot of hard work, especially if you have acreage, even people with means, can be pretty surprised how much it would cost to hire someone to do it all. And then on the insurance part of it, Brent, would you lump that into the hierarchical thing where or code requirements or insurance requirements as a motivator? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that's another thing that I could look on more closely. I know from a lot of research that's been done on campus with Oregon's watershed councils that these kinds of programs like technical assistance, financial support has been very, very successful. And I have a former student who works for Washington Water Trust now, and we did a research project last summer, same thing up in Washington State on the west side of the state. For salmon passage and for stream buffers and stuff like that. It's been fairly successful from what he was telling me.
All right, I don't see anybody else with a hand up. Anybody in the room have anything question-wise?
Well, if anyone has any follow-up or questions or anything like that, it's easy to find me. No issue here.
Well, Brent, thank you very much for spending an hour or so with us today to go over some of those results in a little more detail. We'll be sure to capture another link to that survey. If folks haven't looked at it in depth, I would encourage you to take a look through the paper that goes through those results so you can digest them a little more thoroughly if you're interested. I think there's a lot of good insights in there. So Brent, from all of us here, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us this morning.
All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
And of course, you're welcome to stay, but we're going to continue on with a roundtable of updates for those that want to share. And I think maybe we'll start off in the room if people are okay with that, and just go around, and then I'll call down the list after that. So maybe we'll start with Heather, if you don't mind, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so just continue with the announcement that we're hosting a free NFPA ASIC class down in McLean on June 3 and 4. We have space available still. We do want to try to close registration on Thursday, so if you've been thinking about participating in that, please sign up so we can get those final numbers in. The other thing that our office has been working on is doing community webinars weekly for Wildfire Awareness Month. This week we're going to be doing evacuation preparedness on Thursday at noon. Happy to share the link for that registration if you want to sign up. We'll have Nathan Garrity as one of our panelists for that. And then next week we're going to have May Project Wildfire from OSU Extension doing fire resistant plants at noon on Thursday.
All right. Bill.
Bill Boos, Operations Chief for Brent Fire. It's interesting, the conversation around insurance. So I sit on the Oregon Fire Chief Wildfire Policy Committee, and I'm on the insurance piece of that. I'm also Vice President of Oregon Fire Chiefs, will be president here in a month. But we were back in Washington. We talked with Ron Wyden. He's got a huge concern with the insurance component of that. and the impacts to people and their insurance. We're not seeing anybody at this point getting dropped from insurance. Oregon is a little bit different than California. We do have, for people that can't find insurance, there are ways to do that, so people can get insurance, but it would be more costly. Because our concerns were after the Beachy Creek fire, the Holiday fire, Riverside fire, and then Alameda, was what the impacts were going to be there. We haven't seen insurance companies at this point, and talking with the insurance commissioner from Oregon, there's concern, but we're not seeing anything on that. So that's good right now. So, obviously we're super concerned about this summer. Drought Monitor Index is pretty much stating that we're going to have a super dry summer from Lake County, Klamath, all the way up, just shoots this side of the Cascade Mountains, all the way up into the Dalles and then into Washington. So the potential is definitely there this year. Something.
Andy might have a question for you on your insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm learning a lot being a part of this group. So again, I really appreciate the chance to do that. Being a home insurance agent, I personally in my book of business as well as my clientele, we're experiencing those large rate increases due to the risk, and that's being factored in actuarially in their premiums. But for new clients moving to the area, either from out of state or from the Valley, I mean, at least with my company, I mean, those premiums are double or 150% of what they were just 12 months ago. So I'm trying to work with some of my peers from other insurance companies to see if they're following suit with that. Ironically, I live in Lapine off of Sunrise Boulevard off of Day Road, and it's a well-maintained community, and it's shocking that I can't even write my own house in our new underwriting guidelines because of the trees and so forth. So for me, it's getting unnerving to make sure that I can offer a product for someone who wants to work with me or live here and find affordable insurance in case something like this happens. So I'm learning a lot, but any insight that I can get from you or this group would be very appreciative, either brought up in these presentations or, one-on-one. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I can't speak on the premiums. All I can talk about is, are people getting dropped at this point, and we're not seeing that. So to your point though, Andy, and I'd love to be able to off the record speak with you, but that is a concern all the way up to Washington with Senator Wyden and his office. So making sure that there's affordability and all of that. So it could be deeper, and I can't speak for the rates. Our concern was were people getting dropped and not having that. So and we're not seeing that in Oregon at this point, like you do in California. So
yeah, I haven't seen the non-renewals are being dropped, but we are getting a lot of quotes just because, hey, so-and-so is getting out of the business. They're not saying they're non-renewing, but they're getting out of the business, which sometimes means this is a more effective way of trying to get off the risk kind of a thing. And again, this is just an individual little here and there as things progress, but yeah, I'll reach out to you for maybe an off the record conversation just to learn some insight that so I can be more informed.
You bet. That's it. I just wanted to address that.
Okay. Big changes on the fire prevention side of things, right?
Well, I mean, prevention is the reason that, I mean, if we don't have communities like Firewise and people aren't, doing the front end work of everything that needs to get done, by the time we show up, it's going to make it really difficult for us to be able to do what we need to do. So by the time we get there, it's too late. So we need to really be upfront and really looking at defensible space. If you look at any of those fires that went through Detroit and McKinsey and all of that, some stood and some didn't, and it had to do with how they were protected and what they did around their properties. So, I mean, what's happening here is really, really important to making sure the home survivability. I'm also concerned with, we saw in Colorado here a couple months ago where they lost quite a few structures, and it was structure to structure. And so when we're densifying our housing, there's that concern also, that now we're talking about a whole different fuel model, and I could give examples. We have it here in Bend. So if we get wind-driven fires and those types of things in some of these housing developments, it's going to be really taxing for us. So,
Bill, while we're on the subject of prevention, you guys do have a bunch of change going on right now as well.
yeah, we have a new fire marshal. He started yesterday. We actually, our whole prevention division are a lot of new people in there. So we've turned the corner with Bent Fire anyways. And so it's going to take a little bit of time, but we've got some really talented people that are in there.
And before I move on to Boyd, I see Andy's hand is still up, maybe from before, but Ben's hands is up as well.
Yeah, hi, Ben Nuda with Oregon Department of Forestry. I'm not sure, I don't know where you're hearing that people aren't getting dropped, and I don't know the rest of the story, but here recently, a couple months ago, I've had calls from an insurance agent whose client was being dropped in La Pine, and was hoping that I could do something, write a letter, that kind of thing and go take and I didn't go down and take a look at the place because with the Senate Bill 360 going along, I don't have nobody has any official laws or guidelines to kind of back up a letter that says they're defensible, and they're really concerned and saying it was in fact, the way it was described to me was that the insurance policy was up for renewal, and that they were a random selection, or a certain number of them would be evaluated, and they were evaluating them based on NFPA Firewise standards. And the property itself was in good shape. In fact, it's a fairly new Firewise community, I believe. And but within 100 feet, whereas the neighbors, a neighbor's untreated, undeveloped, vacant lot, one direction, and then it backed up to La Pine State Park property, and that was within 100 feet and untreated. And because the broad brush of the Firewise 100 needs to be 100 feet, even if it's on the neighbor's property, whoever was sent down to evaluate the property said, nope, it doesn't meet the criteria. And the message that this agent was getting was that they were getting dropped based on that. So that raised a lot of red flags to me, and I don't know why that's not. And I wish I would have done more follow-up and for Chief Boost and stuff, but it seems like things are maybe turning, or I don't even recall what or insurance company that was, but there's that kind of stuff out there.
Yeah, Ben, and that's what we're concerned about, is the turning and what's going to happen with that. All I can speak from was, and this is the first I've heard of this, but from what you were talking about in La Pine, but we contacted all the fire defense board chiefs in the state of Oregon to find out if any of them had anybody that had contacted them. And so that was where we were going off of. But to your point, that's what we're concerned about is, are we going into a new normal now? And how do we stay in front of that?
I'm hoping they really take a look at that. And I mean, crossing property lines, that's a tough one. And if I hear more of that stuff, I'll send it your way.
That'd be great.
Encourage them to have, maybe their Firewise committee can write a letter on their behalf. And I don't, it's up to it's a private company. They'll do what they're going to do, but maybe that'll help. And I'll take a closer look at some of that stuff. But it's really so broad brush. It doesn't account for tree species or treatments under the canopy and that kind of thing, that it's going to be a real tough thing to manage, I think.
Right.
All right, and we're going to talk more about insurance even next month, so this is maybe a preview to that.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay. All right. Boyd, anything from Eagle Crest?
I just want to comment on Brent's presentation. That one of the things that I got from that was that neighborhood associations were relatively high sources of accepted information. And at least for our HOA, the Firewise program and our Firewise committee, we contribute to every one of our quarterly HOA newsletters as an educational kind of thing. So it's good to know that maybe that's a little more effective than maybe we had any idea. So I think that was a little ray of sunshine in my day.
All right.
And that's kind of where we're at, is going forward with feeding information to our homeowners.
Great. Commissioner Adair.
For those of you in the room that are on Zoom that don't know it, I actually had the fire go around my house in '93, with 3 people dying, 359 homes burning. But my husband and I always had the policy to keep everything as impeccably clean as possible. And the winds that morning were like 80 miles an hour. And I don't know how, but the people picked up a 40-yard, cubic yard dumpster that was full of sumac. And I don't know how the man got there, picked it up and took it out, or that would have exploded on our property. So, and at that time, we actually were supposed to go back with USAA insurance, and guess what? They said, no way, are we going back with you? I had to stay with the California Fair Plan. So always really aware and really believe that personal responsibility, everybody's got to clean up around their house. Don't use bark, that can blow, those embers can go into houses. And one of my important stories, I think, for the entire group is one of my, in a development down the hill from our house, a brand new home had venting, and an ember went in that venting and that house burned to the ground. There were like 300 homes around it that didn't burn, but that home did, just because of the screening. So this is 1993. Please, if your home is older, please check your screening and replace it. It's a really, besides, cleaning your gutters and everything, it's a very effective way of keeping your property safe. Truly, if the wind's blowing, it's a nightmare. When we had that 70 mile an hour wind, remember September 7th in 2020, you've got to really do your part. And that's just, that's what matters, what's safe. Insurance is going to be, I think, critical, and we really in Deschutes County have to pick it up on. So are we up to like 65 Firewise communities now?
I need to re-pull the numbers. Not all of them have identified me as the regional coordinator, so there's a few falling through the cracks. I think I'm sitting at 62 with a couple of them pending, and I think there probably are 2 or 3 more out there that I don't know about that made it through the process.
Well, I think that's really outstanding. Right? I mean, it's like doubled since I started, I think. So I'm very proud that the community is stepping up.
I feel the same way. Very proud of it. It's amazing how many just happened in the last 2 years. It's going to work like this pretty cool to see.
And I'm really happy that Fire Free doubled, tripled at the transfer stations, and please take advantage of that opportunity. It's your time to really clean up your property, and we've had so much moisture, fortunately, but let's get it properly cleaned up now.
Yeah. All right, we'll move to the folks online. Andy, I see your hand up again. Maybe we'll start with you.
Well, just real quick, I had emailed Boone yesterday that I'm a little overwhelmed and I might not be able to present, but I'll be honest, I've gotten pretty fired up, no pun intended, from the discussion today. And so I really do want to share what I have so far with you guys next month. I don't know how detailed and formal it'll be, but I would be happy to be involved and share what I know and what I've learned just in the next 30 days. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna just call down the list here. If you have an update, great. If not, that's fine too. And I'll start with Bob Foley.
Thank you, Ed. Just wanted to thank the county commissioners again for our fuels reduction grant because this year's fire-free event in Mountain High was better than last year, a lot more participation. And we were fortunate to have a hot dog lunch this year. And to talk about Firewise, the Firewise national event on May 7th was the impetus of that. And we talked about defensible space, handed out Boone's nice brochures for Project Wildfire, and everybody had a good time in spite of the 46-degree weather. It wasn't exactly picnic weather that day, but had great participation. So thank you again, County Commissioners, for giving us that fuels reduction grant.
Yeah, our weather during Fire Free, I think, hampered a little bit of activity with with snow flurries instead of warm weather. But that's great to hear, Bob, that your event went off well. So, Ben, anything from ODF you'd like to share?
Not a whole lot. There's more Western States Fire Manager grants we're applying for around the area. Lots of stuff going on. Currently, we've heard about the chipper grant, small forest land grant. We'll have a roadside chipping type program in the fall, and a couple targeted communities. Getting a pretty good response out of those. We've got a third of our seasonals on, or so, third to a half, and helping get some of the prescribed burning done with the Forest Service, heavily engaged in that. We've sent some folks off to New Mexico. That's really our engine's been down there for 5 weeks now. We're sending our third rotation of crew members down there, so we're helping our neighbors, and as they've come up to help us during our summer. So yeah, lots of moving parts with ODF these days. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Gary, anything from Rural Fire District number 2?
No, not at all. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Chris Perry, anything from 911?
No updates from 911. Thanks, Ed.
Okay. Dave Mormon.
Good morning from the American Red Cross. A couple of things to report. Nationally, May is our home fire safety campaign, and our goal nationally is to contact 50,000 homes and offer free smoke detectors and provide disaster preparedness education. And our focus in Deschutes County this year is in Romaine Village in southern part of Bend, and we will be out there this Saturday hoping to make 100 homes safer through that process. I know we've also had some recent outreach to sisters in Lapine areas and maybe doing similar work down there. And as I've reported previously, this is a focused effort in May, but on a year-round basis, anyone is welcome to make an appointment for this kind of service to their home from the Red Cross. And the only other thing to report is, for the first time in 3 years, our volunteers will be gathering in next month in Salem at Willamette University for our region-wide disaster services or disaster academy, where volunteers will get together for disaster services training to help us prepare for what's to come. So that's our report from the Red Cross.
Thank you, David. Okay, Craig had a pass, and so we will move down to Dean. Anything from UDRC, Dean?
Yeah, Ed. First, if I can, maybe on a personal note, I live in the forest zone, and I'm pretty much surrounded by forest, BLM to the south, and thousands of acres of Deschutes National Forest up to my western boundary. And it was 25 years ago, I got a stewardship authorization from Walt Schloer, Uncle Walt, with the U.S. Forest Service for acreage adjacent to me in the National Forest. And they gave me guidelines and everything, and I'm still working on that. I didn't participate in project in the Fire Free because there's so much material, but Just yesterday, I counted and I threw 23 wheelbarrow loads on my yard debris pile to burn. And so, yeah, I don't know anyone else that's ever gotten a stewardship authorization like I have. But maybe communities can work with agencies to maybe even help, across boundary lines if they have concern, so that they can go a little further out. And then on the information that's available for people that are looking for it, for defensible space and to mitigate wildfire exposure. There's so much out there. It can even be overwhelming. I mean, there's so many different groups working on it, and you could probably spend, all day, every day, just looking at webinars and and information on that. So it's all out there, but it's I'm not sure exactly how coordinated it is. And then just an observation: the chipping programs that the county has done, and now ODF is offering. I think that's probably the most bang for the buck as far as really making a difference on the ground and getting a lot of stuff done in short order. Let's see. Last thing, in the Upper Chutes River communities, we've been working to try to help the more vulnerable community members. And we have a program for low-income seniors and low-income people that are on disability. And I did 4 assessments just this week, which is way up from even last year. And one of the things that I'm running into when I do an assessment, and maybe you've seen this too, is on the older homes, for instance. Maybe they have good, even if they have good defensible space around the home, if it's an older home and it has wood siding and it has a wooden deck attached, we assess all of that and give all that information to the homeowners, but we can't really assist them with that sort of thing. And I don't know what the solution is there. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Leave us with a conundrum there. Moving down the list, Ellie, anything to share?
Hi, thank you. I just thought of a question. Wondering about vinyl siding versus the wood siding that was just mentioned on older homes or ever newer.
That was a question a couple meetings ago, right?
Yeah, I think it is. I think most of the studies are looking at the vinyl siding as inferior to doing the like the cement fiberboard siding. Ultimately that's what you'd want. But that vinyl siding, it does reach a point in which it melts and it'll fall off the wall, exposes the wood beneath it, and it does catch on fire.
Okay.
When it really comes down to it, the key to it all, I mean, even if you're thinking about the siding going from a dry cedar to something else, the key is really looking at that 0 to 5 around your home and just making sure that you have that disconnect so the fire never reaches the siding.
Thank you.
Hey, Boone, this is Gary. Another thing we found with studies in Florida on that type of siding, that not only does it expose the wood backing behind it to the wildfire once it melts, but it also it's incorporated into the vents to the attic. And so when that siding falls, it also pulls out the vents, which allows penetrations, open penetrations into your attic for embers to reach your attic area.
Interesting.
One thing that saved our house was that we had an outside sprinkler system. I turned that on immediately when I knew there was a fire coming over the mountain. And we didn't even have smoke damage in our house. It was really pretty remarkable. Homes in that development down the hill, actually they had smoke damage. It really did make a difference. So, the water hadn't been shut off yet, and, truly, it kept the smoke out of our house. And it was a huge fire. It hadn't burned in like 40 years.
That was outside sprinklers
Yes.
on the house or in the yard?
No, on the yard, but they circled the back of the house where the fire was coming from. So somehow that just really did protect our house a lot.
Thank you.
All right, moving down our list, we got a few more folks. I think Greg would be up next if you have anything, Greg.
Okay, just want to say that last Thursday we had an annual meeting and Boone made a real good presentation there. So thank you very much, Boone.
Welcome.
And then pertaining to the county grant, we finally I got the three dumpsters out for yesterday. So we should be using those in the next 3 weeks. And then also Heart of Oregon is going to come out and review some of our lots. They originally had about 40 to 50 of our lots that they would come out and help us with. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Jeff, there's a little bit happening with burning. Anything to share there or otherwise for the Forest Service?
Yeah, on the Forest Service side, Robert knew he's not with you today because he's out being burn boss out in the Sun River area. I'm sure some of you saw the smoke yesterday. Burned 200 acres just north of Cottonwood, and today they're going to implement another 500 acres around the Cottonwood exit. So that's the plan there. So if you see more smoke, that's where it's coming from in the Bend area. Later in the week, if we don't get the moisture, we might move into the Ann's Butte area. But that's a little bit up in the air at this point. But in general, yeah, got our lookouts up. We're getting another round of temps next week. Have resources in New Mexico, and we appreciate the support from our ODF partners. And we have folks from Sun River out on those burns right now. So all spring long, we've had some of Ben's folks helping us out. So we appreciate that, Ben. And other than that, our planning is moving forward. Clone east of Sun River is moving forward. Cabin Butte project south of Bend is out for a comment period right now, if you're interested in that. And our small fuels projects are ongoing as well. So that's everything I have from the Newberry side of things. I'm not sure if there's any other federal folks on to chat about their districts, but that's it for Bend.
Thanks, Jeff. Jody, anything to share?
Yeah, good morning. Oregon Living with Fire was working on a couple of things. I'm sure some of you saw next week, City Club is hosting a forum on building resiliency into living with wildfire. So I will actually drop a link to that in the chat, and then I'm sending an email out about that later today. And then we're also working on a prescribed fire tour for elected officials and key stakeholders. It's going to be up in the Sisters area. So once we have a better idea of the window of opportunity, there will be an availability for the public to get close to it, but the actual tour part will be limited to an invitation only group because we only have so much NOMEX to go around. So that's what we're working on here. And then just keeping our eyes on the Southwest. Joe Sutler actually just dispatched out to New Mexico, and we're just following some of the resource sharing that we're doing here in the region with that region as well as we prep for the upcoming busy fire year. Thanks.
All right, and Kevin, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Kevin Robinson from the Sisters Ranger District, working in fire prevention. Yeah, just to add on to Jeff there, Sisters today is burning another safer unit, so just south of the town of Sisters, and then Thursday planning on burning some more. We've been trying to implement the IFR unit along Highway 20 near Indian Ford Road. Certainly more higher profile since it's the highway, but the winds haven't been favorable, but potentially sometime we'll hopefully get that in. I can't definitely speak too much of the goings on of Sisters itself, but I'd like to thank at least Brent Steele for the presentation, the fire prevention, education, and the PIO side of things. It's really helpful just to kind of help us understand how to adjust our message when we need to. So thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Joyce, anything to share from the ridge side of Eagle Crest?
Sure. We just finished our FireWise collection for Fire Free, and we really were so lucky to be able to use part of our discretionary grant that we got last year for dumpsters. It's the first time that we've really tried dumpsters in a long time, and we filled actually 6 30 cubic yard dumpsters and with bagged yard debris that were dumped into the dumpster. And then we also did 59 full 10-yard dump trailers that we put the piles at various chipping sites. So that worked out really well. As a matter of fact, Patrick Environmental is on the premises right now to do the chipping, and they'll probably have another day. They worked all day yesterday, today, and tomorrow to do the chipping. We hope cut down on the cheatgrass in some areas that we have there. And then next week we're going to be meeting finally with Ross Huffman as far as kind of getting some ideas and confirmations for the grant from Senate Bill 762. So we're kind of doing that. That'll all be in the home ignition zone. So get people, continue to keep them interested in, especially the home ignition zone. Anyway, that's kind of where we are. So thank you so much for all of your participation and ideas that you give us. Thanks.
Thanks, Joyce. Sounds like things are busy up that way. Mitch, anything from Heart of Oregon?
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Just a quick update on our end. A couple weeks ago, we did officially receive our grant funding from Senate Bill 762 in partnership with COIC. So that was exciting, and actually started on our first project last week. We're doing about a 200-acre unit north of Crooked River Ranch, doing some juniper removal right now. So project work is officially underway with that grant funding, which is really exciting. And at this point, just focusing on getting some more work scheduled later in this summer. And then we are working on hiring our fire fuels planner, who will dedicate their time exclusively to planning and identifying projects for this grant funding. So yeah, underway with our 762 funding.
That's great to hear. Thanks, Mitch. Nathan.
Hey, good morning, everybody. We're just kind of trying to prep for 2022. We've reevaluated our temporary evacuation points that we've used the last 2 years. We've added a couple, so we're working on facility owners just to ensure that that's still good to go, and then with the Red Cross to coordinate. But at this point, we've identified 10 temporary evacuation points geographically dispersed across the county. And really, we started using that system during COVID, or at least the first couple of years of COVID, in an attempt to minimize congregate sheltering. And it actually just worked really well operationally, because oftentimes we're sending people to shelters, and then within 6 hours, hopefully, in some cases, we're sending them home. So the temporary evacuation point, it allows us to quickly mobilize, get people set, heading in a direction. We bought some sign kits so that we can set those up for the temporary evacuation points. So we're kind of expanding that, just again, trying to finalize that list. And then on Thursday, we'll be doing a county-wide test message of our opt-ins in partnership with the Deschutes County 911. And we will, I think there's about 41,000, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, opt-ins Is that right, Chris?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so hopefully about 40,000 people or so will get a test message on Thursday afternoon around 1 o'clock. And the goal of that is for them to go into their account, their profile, make sure it's current and up to date. And then if they don't get a message, either sign up because they don't have a profile or they haven't updated their profile to include their new information. So we will be activating a small joint information center at 911 to field phone calls from people that might need some assistance. And you should see a press on that coming out today in preparation for that. And I think that's all I have of significant note.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. A couple more folks. So Paula's got to pass, Todd's got to pass. We'll go down to Tom. Anything from Redmond Fire?
Just a couple quick things. I think tomorrow's Wednesday. My days are all scrunched together. Yeah, tomorrow I'll be presenting a open burning ordinance to our board. So it'd be the first reading where we'll actually start regulating open burning a little bit better up here. So I haven't had the pitchforks and torches come out up here yet. So I mean, I'm kind of expecting them, but I haven't seen them yet. So, and then we're going to do the final reading of our other ordinance, which is adopting the fire, state fire code as a fire district up here. So those are kind of the two big things on our burners.
All right. Thank you, Tom. And last but not least, unless I miss somebody, would be Travis from Cloverdale.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. And did anybody have a go back, or did I miss anybody before we close out the meeting today?
I'll go ahead and just throw out there that if people are interested in the Defensible Space Code development process that's going on, there is a meeting tomorrow morning starting at 8 a.m. on Teams. You can follow that, and they're actually reviewing the chapters of the new code.
Okay. Is that on the information on the meeting on the State Fire Marshal website, I would assume, or guess, or?
I think so, under the defensible space page.
Okay. All right. Great. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. Okay. All right. With that, we are just coming up right at 9:30. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you back here next month.